Ois Vav. So the Rebbe explained in the previous Ois that normally the nefesh and the guf blocks on the nefesh. And because the guf comes from Mimale Kol Almim, over there in the level of Mimale Kol Almim, there is room, there's a tfisa smoking for matters of the guf, and therefore the guf ends up blocking on the nefesh just like the shame Elikim blocks on the name on the shame Havaya. But when you are serving the Eibishter in a way that kol yom yiyabenechu kechadoshim, and that means that you bring down the level of Sovev in Memale so that the items of the guf, which comes from Memale, will not block on the neshama, which comes from the level of Sovev. So serving the Eibishter in such a way, then the guf sees its purpose not as blocking the neshama, but rather the neshama to be able to impact and work through the body. And that's why the Rebbe explained what it says in Likutei Torah, that if you don't have the level of Kol Yom Yu B'Nechel Kechadoshim, at that level, then your bitterness and your simcha will be in Yonim Gashmim, because the mitzad the guf, which is memale kol almim, that's what is important. That's what the mitzias is. It is only when you bring in the yichud sevav memale to show that the main thing is that within memale you have the sevav, which is the level of chadoshim, which is always the same with the same chayis when you do the mitzvah, which is ma'orer the sarusa de la'ela, which brings down the sevav in the memale. Then it brings that the important thing is the nefesh and not the guf, and the guf serves then the nefesh. And now the Rebbe is going to explain this is also connected to the idea of shikha, that golus has to do with forgetting, because uh, in golus is connected to the level of limitation. Limitations. So before, I remember it's in Zman. I remembered it earlier, now I forgot it. But when we talk about Bligvul, then there is no forgetting. The Golus L'Shikha. Based on this, we can explain the connection between Golus, that in the time of exile we say, Kavayochel, there is forgetting. The Eibishter forgot us, so to speak, Moshe Kosuf. Like the pasuk says, "Lama lo netzach tishkachenu genu." Why forever will you forget us? What's the connection between shikha and golus? Kisibas hashikha hi shayidia shahoisa etzlei mikoidem hoisa mugubelas. What is the cause for forgetting? The cause why does one forget is because the thing that you knew earlier before you forgot it was limited. It was limited, so came a time you forgot it. So then as time goes on, it is interrupted. Move on. So that from this we can understand what does it mean, shikha above. That it's associated with the level of oir hamugbal with the oir hamemale. In the idea that we talk about remembering and forgetting, so to speak, as we say it above, the inyan hazikorin, the idea of memory to remember who b'sevev. That's in the oir, the chayis that comes from sevev, the kivon shehu Bligvul, since the Oir HaSovev is unlimited, Ein Shaykh Shom Hefsek, over there, it doesn't fit, there's no interruption in the level of Sovev. V'inyan Hashikha Hu B'malchus. And the idea of forgetting is a malchus, which is the shoyrish of Bligvul, the shoyrish of Gevul and Nivroim. So Shikha comes from the level of malchus. The malchus is shoyrish hanivroim, which is memali. And therefore, Kishekiyum hatoiro mitzvahs de ha'odom, hu ba'ofen de b'chol yoim, hem kechadoshim. When a person observes the Torah mitzvahs, is in such a way that he does the mitzvah of kol yoim, hem kechadoshim, every day it's like new. So what happens is Sarusa de Latat of the person brings the Gilu of a Sarusa de Laila, brings the Gilu of Seviv Kulam. That way, the revelation of the light, which is Bligvul, also shines in the limited light. So then it doesn't apply. There's no forgetting, because now we're dealing with Bligvul, we're dealing with the Oir HaSovev. And when the Sovev comes down to Memale, there is no forgetting, because in Bligvul there's no forgetting. But when the performance of Torah mitzvahs of the person is limited, it's not kuchadoshim. It's not that you have the ability to bring down the level of Sovev because your avoida is in a limited. It's not in a way of kichadoshim, the level of Sovev level Bligvul. She'oz kishemakayim oisei oiso hamitzvah b'pam shni or shlishis. So then, that when you fulfill that same mitzvah a second time and a third time, ein lo oisei hachayis k'moshe hoyetzle b'pam horishono. He doesn't have that same excitement, the same energy as he did it the first time. It's not kichadoshim. So there, through this kind of avodah, not being enthusiastic as the first time, not being kichadoshim. So what does he cause above? That in the light, the light which is mugbal, will not be the revelation of Oir HaBligvul. So this brings about the idea of forgetting, which is the idea of golus, which is shikha, which is associated to the level of Oir HaMugbal, to the Malakul Almin. So in order to have the inyan of zikaron, not shikha, we need to bring down the Oir HaSovev into the Oir HaMemale, because the lack of shikha is because it is infused by Oir HaSovev that is in Oir HaMemale. But when the person is not performing mitzvahs kol yom kadoshim, which brings down the Oir HaMemale, which is the Oir HaSovev, which is higher than Zman, into the Zman, then if he doesn't do that, so the Oir HaMemale in itself, there is shikha there. That's why you get shikha. And just like by the person, when his performance of Torah mitzvahs is limited, so what happens to the person, as we said before from the Likutei Torah, what evolves from this? That his delight is in worldly matters. So even though it's not an Avera openly, because this is enjoying matters of the world, even if it's permissible, still it's still opposite of Kedusha. So just like by the person not having the avodah of kol yom ben chadoshim, if he only does Torah mitzvahs in a limited way. So this eventually brings the person to areas which are opposite the Kedusha in Taivas in Inyon Elam Hazeh. Al derech zeh hu l'mayla. Similar is in the way it takes place above in the Sfiris. The Ayidei Shazo, the Zeid Ampim, which is the level of Soviv, Mistalik, that it doesn't come into Malchus. The Zo, the Soviv, and Malchus doesn't come to Mamali, which is Kutchabrichu Solik Le'ela. Kutchabrichu, which is the level of Zeid Ampim, goes up above. Venisha Raka Malchus Mamali, and all what's left is Malchus Mamali. This causes for Malchus to descend. Lahachiyos HaKlippa is to vitalize the Klippa. That's why you have Golus. The Golus HaShechina, the exile of the divine. The divine is exiled into being Mechaya, the Klippas. And that's why that's like the level of Shikha, not having the level of Seviv Kol Almim, not having Zoe in Malchus leaves Malchus vulnerable to be able to be Machaya Klippas and brings about the level of Golus. And it all comes because we don't bring down the level of Seviv into Mamale. We don't have the Avodah. When we have the Avodah of Kol Yom Benech Chadoshim, then you're Mamshich Zo into Malchus, you're Mamshich Seviv into Mamale. But when you are just doing your Avodah Boifin Mugbal, and you're not doing it, you're not bringing down Seviv into Mamale, you're not bringing down Zo into Malchus, so then there becomes Golus from that. Oizai, the Rebbe ties this now to the Haftorah of Shabbos Chazon. We can tie this to what it's written in the Haftorah of Shabbos Chazon. So over there it says that Yoda Shoir Koinehu Gomer, that the ox knows its owner, etc. But Yisrael lo Yoda Ami lo Hizbainer. But my people, Yidden, the Yisrael, my nation, they don't know. And my Ami, my nation, Lo Yizbainer, did not reflect who is there, who owns them. Hashem doesn't think about Hashem. The ox knows its owner, but the Yidden don't know Hashem. The Arizal explains, Upirish Harizal, the Arizal explains, when the Rebbe said the Maimer was on Daled Elul, because Hey Elul is the Daled, I'm sorry, Elul, I mean Daled Menachemov, because Hey Menachemov is the Hilula Yortzeit of the Arizal. So the Arizal, Yom Erev Yom HaHilula Shelo, on Daled Menachemov is the Erev, the Yom HaHilula, which is on the 5th of. So what does the Arizal explain? The Shoir, when we say Yoda Shoir, the ox Nukaneu, Koyi al ha'egel she'asu ha'erev rab. That's talking about the ox, the calf, that was made by the Erev Rab Midbar in the desert. The egel that they made in the desert. How did they make the egel? So it says, Al yidei she'ishlichu hatas. They threw that piece of tray or a piece of metal. Shekosav by Moshe wrote on that tas. He wrote Alei Shoir. Moshe Rabbeinu is called B'choir Shoir Hodalei. He's called a Shoir. And when the Mitzrim had placed Moshe's coffin into the Nilus, and Moshe Rabbeinu needed, as Yosef made the people, his brothers, swear that they are going to go up, they should take up his bones, to bring up the bones of Yosef with them. And so how did Moshe Rabbeinu bring it up? He wrote on a tas, he wrote the words Ali Alei Shoir. b'chdei lahalis hareinu shel Yosef. So that brought up Yosef's coffins to the surface so that Moshe Rabbeinu could take him for the journey through the desert. So the Arizal explains the betas ze hoyo kosuv Hashem Yoli Yud Lamed Yud. In the name, this is the Shem Hasheni Shel Hashem Ben Ayin Beis Shemis. That's the second name of the name of 72 names, which means there is the different Kabbalah, the different gematrias that we come from the level Yud K Vav K, and there's also the number 72. There's also to spell it Yud K Vav K, the various cheshbonis to get to the 72, and then from that we have 72 different makeup of the different names, and the second name over there is the name Yud Lamed Yud. So that was the name in which he wrote Moshe. That's the name he wrote on that tas to bring up Shahu, and this name Yali is Hamemuna Al Koyach HaShoira Elyon. He is appointed over the power of the supreme ox. What the ox represents above, it's the Yali who is in charge, and therefore he can bring up the Shoir, brings up Yosef. So, what does it mean over here? Vizehu, what does it mean over here? So he says like this: Yoda Shoir Koneu Yisrael Lo Yoda. So the words Yisrael Lo Yoda is the Rosh Tevis of Yoli. So what does it mean that the ox knows its owner and Yidden don't know? Shashoir Atzmoi, the ox itself, Yoda Shehu Mishem Kodesh. This was the name that the Yidden threw in, the Erev Rav, the one they threw into the fire, from which came up the Egel. So the ox itself, the Yoli, which is the Memuna, the Koyach HaShoir, Yoda Shehu Mishem Kodesh, he knows that he is part of the holy name of the 72 names of the name of Avayim Beis, Shemah. But V'Yisrael Lo Yoda. The Yidden doesn't know. Ami Lo Yizboinen. They didn't reflect. Lo Yoda Lo Yizboinen Ubazeh. They didn't know and reflect that this is actually a holy name. V'Omru, and they said, Shaha'egel Olam Ma'atzmei, that the Egel came up by itself. It's not the shame Yoli, the same shame that brought up Yosef, the Shoir Yosef, is the same shame that brought up this Egel, that made the Egel come from the fire, and that they worshipped. And they said that the Egel went up of itself. It's not the name Yoli. It's not the name Yud Lamed Yud. That's why they went astray and they followed the ox, because they failed to realize that the Shoir Yoda Sherkaneu. But Ami, they didn't think that it was the name of Yoli that brought up the Egel, that brought it up from the fire. So that's why they followed straight after the golden calf, after the Egel. So the beginning of the words Yisrael lo Yoda, and then Ami lo Yizboinen is Yali Allah. That really Yali Allah, what brought it up was the Yud Lamed Yud, Yisrael lo Yoda, the levels of Yali, Ami lo Yizboinen, level of Ali. So really it's Yali Allah. So lo Yodu lo Yizboinenu. They didn't know and they didn't reflect. the fact that the shir came up, well, they shem yoli. They didn't realize that it was lochein amru shalom atzma, and that's why they said it went up by itself. So the Rebbe now explains why this is also has to do with the fact that they didn't reach the higher level of kechadoshim. This is actually teaching us a zuchus, a merit, why the Yidden failed. That it's not so intentionally, it is because they didn't reach the higher level. B'yesh loymar, we can say the pirush of the Arizal, b'Yisrael lo yode ami lo yizboinen, that Israel doesn't know, my nation didn't reflect. This is a finding a merit for the Yid. The reason for this, that they strayed after the Egel, is because they didn't reflect in matters, which is Hashem Yoli, which is the name of Yoli, which is higher than the world. And because they didn't go to the level of higher than the world, higher than Hagbolas, to the level of Kol Yom Yubanech Chadoshim, a level of the Mailam Hagbolas, so they strayed, as the Rebbe says, that if you don't have the level of infusing mamale, or having the person serve the Eibishter with Kol Yom Benach Chadosh and a higher than Akbola, then eventually you fail. So that was the reason that they didn't reflect on things which were higher. Hainu Shagam Oz of the Sabaye. Even then, they also served the Eibishter. Elo Shekiv on Shahos Hoy Lifnei Atzivui. The Kol Yom Benach Chadoshim. Since it was before the Eibishter instructed them that it should always be like new. So that's why their service was limited. So therefore, that revelation that did shine to them at the time before their avodah was the chadoshim, it was a limited avodah. So it was only the oil that was dressed in the world. And from this it involved that they went astray after the Egel. So therefore, this is a limud schus, and this is also connected that when we don't have the level of soiviv infusing the mamale, then you are bound to make a mistake. And also that the sin of the Egel caused to the breaking of the luchas. Because before the luchas were brought, Torah was always remembered. And the Chazal tell us that once the luchas were brought, it brought about the shikhas HaTorah. Hainu. So what does it mean for the Shagam la'achar hayachet nishar hakesha shalahem im HaTorah? Even after the sin, they remained. The problem here is the shikha, that they don't have the connection to the higher. So even after the sin, there is a tie connected with the Torah. V'rak shalimut ha-Torah shel acharei shviras haluchas. The only thing is that the study of Torah after the breaking of the luchas, hu b'hagbola, it becomes limited, which means there is shikhas ha-Torah shelachein shayich b'zeh hefsek shikha. That's why it lies there. There could be forgetting there. V'al yidei zeh, And also through this, Nase Efshoris, Shetiyei Uma Veloshin Shaletis Behem, that a nation and another language can dominate the Yidden because there is no longer the infusion of Sevev, of Zoh, Kikshagilu, Hurak, Mebchinas Malchus, Yesh Nisinas Mokum Lugolus Kenal, because when the Gilui is only from the level of Malchus, there is still room for Golus. So, and that's all which is with the level of Shikha, which brought about the Egel. It brought about the Egel because Lo Hizboinam, because they didn't have yet the higher level of the Lamaila. So therefore, they went after the Egel, just like we say going after the Tivus. But it's in a level which means it doesn't go away, it's Shikha, and this brings about forgetting, it brings about also the idea of Golus, because when there is no infusion of Zoe in Malchus, it gives room for Golus. And Ches, V'zeu Mashekosuf, and this is what the Pasuk says in Eicha, Zechor Havaya Ma Hoyolonu. So we say, remember Hashem, that the Ma, which is the Shem Havaya, Hoyolonu, that becomes ours, it becomes the Likim. We'll see in the Taichas here. The Tzemach Tzedek. Zechor Havaya. So we're talking about when we're in Golus, we're asking for the level of Zechorin. Zechor Havaya Moilon. Vayre Tzemach Tzedek, the Ma hu Shem Havaya. Ma is level. Number 45 is the same as the level of Havaya. Yud Kei Vav Kei. B'milui alfin, when you make the fill of the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Hey Aleph, and the you fill it with the Aleph, it comes out to the number 45. Yud Kei Vav Kei, when you write it out, it comes out 45. Ma. V'lonu, and the word lonu b'gimatir elikim. And lonu is the value of elikim. Upirush ma hoyolonu hu. What is the meaning of ma was lonu? Shahavaya nase b'bchinas elikim. That Havaya became lonu, became elikim. What does it mean? V'yashleimar the inyan ma hoyolonu b'avodas ha'odom. What is the meaning that ma became lonu in avodas ha'odom in the service of man? Havaya hu l'mayla ma'atava. Havaya is beyond nature. B'elikim b'gematria ha'tava. So Havaya becomes Elikim, which means a lot of times we see have a gilui from higher than Teva, and we claim that this is Teva. Shagam ksheyesh lo adam hatzlocha shalom alam haTeva. Even when a person has success, which is beyond nature, who choshev sheza Teva, he thinks this is nature. We say to Mezud, so the ma is hoyolonu. We say to Mezud. Sometimes his success, which is beyond nature, actually causes him to think that it's his power and the strength of his hand made him this great fortune. So Eibishter is giving him l'mayla min ha'teva. The Eibishter is giving him Havaya, and he says, Ma hoyolonu. Now all of a sudden we say that this is Teva. But then show you Be'egel, similar to wasn't the Egel, the Zeh shal yidei Hashem Yoli Nase Aliyas HaShoyer, the fact that through the name Yoli became the Aliyah HaShoyer Inyan Shalamayla Ma'ateva. So the ox went up, the Egel went up with the name of Yoli, through the name of Hashem. That brought him to think that he wanted by himself. So what do we say? Zechor Hashem. Havaya. to remember Havaya, Sha'avoida Tiya Ba'ifun the Zikorin. We need to serve Hashem remembering, L'mayla Magbola, which is the level of B'chol Yom Yivanach Chadoshim. Sha'ayidei Zeh Meir Hagilu de Havaya, that way it shines the Gil of Havaya, Oir HaSoiviv Gam Shalamayla Mehislapshus. Then you get the Zechoir Havaya, the Meho Yilon, to remember Havaya, the Oir HaSoiviv Gam Shalamayla Mehislapshus, which is also higher than dressing up in the world, and then we get to remember the level of Zikorim. And that brings down the higher into the world. Also, to connect this to the interpretation of Hashem of the Pasuk, the Ma Hoyo Lonu. So the Ma Hoyo Lonu, Gilui Ma Da Neshama. The Ma, the level of Ma of the Neshama was revealed to us. Ki Ma Da Neshama Hu Etzem HaNeshama Shelamaylo Mehislapshus. That's the essence of the soul that is higher than dressing up in the body. It's not like the Naran. It's the essence of Kishure Mavaya Shalumayla Mislapshus Ba'ilons. And that's connected to Havaya, which is higher than dressing up in the world. Then that way, when we have the Mahoyalanu, we work with the Etzem HaNeshama, which is higher than Islam Shalomis. This brings to Zechoir, the Avodah Shalomayla Magvola Avodah, which is higher than that.